Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Z. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in transgender care. Welcome to my channel and welcome to Monday Q&A. This is a place where you ask me your direct and specific questions, as long as they're not questions that I can just answer by very brief emails, such as, can you tell me if I'm transgender? That is not such an easy via email type of answer. As long as they can be generalized, I'm happy to answer them. If you have questions for me, please feel free to email to info@drzphd.com. It's in the information below, or you can comment underneath this video and I will snatch it in my Q&A folder. Having said that, as always, I blacked out your name for privacy and I have selected 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, as always, random questions. I haven't read them myself. So it's going to be really exciting to see what's on our list today. And there are going to be timestamps in case, oh my God, cannot speak, in case if you want to jump around. Having said that, let's get going. First question for today. Hello, thank you for your videos. You're very welcome. I'm 38-year-old trans woman living in Missouri. The state's attorney general is trying to enact extreme restrictions for gender-affirming healthcare for kids and adults. Yeah, and a lot of other states. It's just awful. I've been outspoken in my opposition to this on social media. My mother is pushing back by expressing many right-wing propaganda about trans healthcare. She said she's worried about the changes she's seen in me. She said that she thought tradition was supposed to make me happy. I've said repeatedly that I am much happier and more confident. Along with that is me being more outspoken about my views. She refuses to acknowledge that the laws the Republican Party is trying to pass is causing me a lot of anxiety and stress. It really hurts that she seems to be putting her political views about her child's rights and happiness. How do I go about talking to her without making the situation worse? I feel like we need group therapy. You know what? You're not the only one. It is really hard right now. There's a lot going on. There's, as always, a lot of information, a lot of misinformation. And for a lot of trans adults, what I witness right now is that people who are in a transition or have gone even through transition, they do feel so much more happier and more alignment, more in alignment with themselves. And at the same time, because of what's going on right now in the world affairs, that's in of itself is still going to bring a breed. Like I said, I can't talk today. I apologize. Breed anxiety and depression, an incredible amount of stress on your psyche. So as a result, a lot of people on the surface may look like or express feeling unhappy, but it's, if you ask them, it's not that they're unhappy about who they are. It's just that they're unhappy with the state of affairs. It's hard to be who you are in a world that is pushing against you so much. And so for that reason, it's very difficult. Now, having a family member, especially somebody who's close to you, like your mom, who is also not really in agreement with what you're doing with your life, is against it, makes things much more difficult. When you add politics to the mix, it becomes very volatile, very combustive type of thing. Politics are, I try to stay out of politics because politics often is so embedded in subjective opinions versus facts versus open-mindedness, and it becomes much difficult. So what can you do about the situation without making it worse? You already mentioned your own answer. If you like, you need group therapy. I don't know. It depends. Is there other issues you're struggling with your mom? Therapy is never a bad idea to explore communication, to maybe hone on learning how to be more effectively in talking to each other. But in general, it's very hard because I can see that you're expressing your opinions to your mom, she's expressing her opinions to you. Both your opinions are very strong, so you go, head in head. Is it possible? My question is not discuss politics with your mother. And I know it could be a tough order, but it might be something that you have to decide for your well-being. If it distresses you so much to hear her opinions and views, is not to talk politics with your mom. Another thing is to kind of acknowledge that this is just her point of view. And that can be really hard to acknowledge because she's in a way talking about you too, right? So it's a tough one, but if perhaps maybe you can decide not to talk about politics, it will ease things up. Yeah, but it's hard. It's hard unless people are willing to discuss facts and to be open about a discussion of the facts. But when people discussing non-factual opinions they gathered on political news websites, it becomes really almost like a regurgitation of somebody else's opinion. So I wish you all the best. I know this is really stressful. Find your support, find people who are supportive. And I want to say talking about politics just upsets stomach, and maybe you can abstain from upsetting your stomach. So I wish you all the best. Next question. Hi, Dr. Z. Thank you so much for all the incredible content over the years. You are so welcome. My pleasure. It's really been invaluable to me. I'm a trans woman who is adjusting to post-transition life and looking back on my medical transition. While I'm incredibly grateful for my medical transition, I also have realized that I rushed into it due to shame. I hear you. The same shame at being feminine that kept me repressed quickly morphed into a need to pass and go styles. Brilliant topic. I should do a video on this. This is fantastic. Both were based on a need to hide. Yep. I now find myself wishing that I had actually embraced my femininity and processed the shame on the front, and instead of hiding from it. Now, here I am still dealing with those feelings rooted in sexism because I was steeped in a culture that told me that being a woman is lesser. What would you recommend for healing from the shame and actually learning to embrace and accept my full self? My goodness, what a beautiful question. I mean, beautiful, albeit very painful one. So common. You touch on so many things, so many trans women specifically feel, trans men too, non-binary people too. This rush into medical, especially surgical transition, because of this need to, suddenly feel styles, feel like you pass, so you don't have to, like you said, quickly morph into need to pass. It is so, so common. And then in retrospect, people look back and they start doing this internal work, right? No, I'm not saying that rushing is a bad thing. And for a lot of people, it does work out. For a lot of people, it doesn't work out. There's also a lot of anxiety about rushing into this medical surgical things because of society today and how the fear that you may not have access to care. So, I want to be very clear. There's no judgment when I talk about it in terms of your decision to rush or take it slow. I know that everybody's circumstances is so drastically different. But sticking to this question, what do I recommend for you to do when here you are, you're post-transition, and yet you still find yourself deeply seated and dealing with feelings of shame and maybe even guilt? Shame is, I have a book I want to write for all of you on, on how to bypass shame and guilt and a way to self-love and acceptance, because shame is so difficult to clean up and to excavate and to detox, because it's in a lot of you, it dates back to childhood, dates back to the first time you were non-conforming in terms of gender without even realizing you were being non-conforming. And there's, on top of that, there's so much collective social shame. Not only shame in how you feel about your genders, then there's so much shame about being transgender, then there's so much shame about being a trans woman. It's just shame on top of shame on top of shame. What I really recommend is go inwards, is to do the inner work. Now, if you are able to get therapy is a big luxury. That would be wonderful. If you can't get therapy, can you start working on those feelings, internal feelings of what you're feeling, why you're feeling? I would encourage for you to get your hands on books written by individuals who are have also struggled with their femininity, to be seen, to be heard, owning their femininity. One of them that comes to mind is called Burning Woman. I can't remember who the author is. I love that book. That book made me realize that I have a voice. I should not be afraid of my voice in a male-dominant society. There's a lot of other books. I'm trying to think now off the top of my head. But yes, read the books by cis women. You are, all of you who are women identified, you're underneath this big giant umbrella of womanhood. And I don't care if people say you never had your womanhood because you didn't go through menstrual cycles and, oh my God, I mean, you name it, whatever. It's one big umbrella as far as I'm concerned, the way I see it. And underneath the umbrella of women, there are cis women, there's trans women, there's non-binary femmes, there's you name it, anybody who identifies and gravitates towards the divine feminine essence. When I say divine feminine, I'm not talking about gender concepts here. I'm talking about energetic resonance and frequencies that you feel in alignment with. So read those books, because you are experiencing the shame also coming from oppression of your femininity. It is a little bit different oppression, but it's still an oppression of femininity that so many cis women experience and continue to experience. Nonetheless, shame is shame. Shame is shame. And it doesn't really matter where it stems from. We still feel the same primary emotions, and shame is definitely one of them. So read those books to empower yourself. Like I said, journaling is going to be excellent, collaging, doing some kind of artwork, and just really learning how to not only love yourself first and foremost, but establishing a relationship with yourself. What I mean by establishing a relationship with yourself, how can you learn to put yourself first? I'm not talking about selfishness. I'm not talking about egocentrism. I'm talking about starting to healthily taking care of yourself first. Remember, I always say this, every time you say yes to somebody else, you say no to yourself. How can you start thinking about what your needs are, what your wants are? How can you create a relationship with yourself that first asks you within what your needs and wants are first before giving to somebody else? And that's going to go miles and miles away for you. I should really do a video on this topic because it's such an important one, but what a great question. That's what I would really recommend for you. And anybody watching, please share below some of your suggestions for this individual. But, you know, a lot of you have very torn and neglected relationships with yourselves because you never learn how to fully self-love yourself. There's so much shame and guilt. You never learn how to value yourself. And I really want all of you to learn how to do that, because all of you are deeply, deeply valuable. And once you step into that value of yourself, a lot of this external shit that is happening in the world is going to hurt a little bit less because you'll know who you are. And that's invaluable. Great question. Question number 3. Dr. Z, can you throw some light on how to cope with dysphoria for those section of transgender people who cannot transition because of numerous factors like society, family, medical, or even finance? How do such miserable people, well, even after denying dysphoria for more than 4 decades, deal further with dysphoria even through they understand they are trans? What a painful question, first and foremost. And I think that you're not alone. There's so many people who've been struggling with dysphoria for even more than 4 decades and feel like they absolutely cannot transition because of one or all of the factors you just listed. What can people do? Again, just what I said for that individual, go inwards. What you can do is you can also recognize that there's so much more to gender identities than just external characteristics, secondary special sex characteristics that socially and culturally gender our bodies and socially and culturally communicate to people around us these concepts of genders that we all created socially over the history of our time. There's so much to being, for example, in feminine energetic shifts. There's so much to being in masculine energetic shifts. There's so much identifying with non-binary energies, much more than just an external appearance. And I know it's very difficult what I say, because so much still does depend on external appearances. And that's why it becomes so challenging. But the internal world cannot be neglected. There's so much more to, for example, identifying as a woman. I'm using a huge woman umbrella, than just external things, right? There's also this internal abilities, your propensities, your way of relating to people, your abilities, your ways to even being able to communicate with people differently. I mean, there's so many little nuances. So I recommend go inwards. Ask yourself what your identity means to you. Ask yourself what else does your identity mean to you beyond these external things that are so dependent on surgery and hormonal treatment in order to modify those characteristics? Ask yourself where all of this, where did you first got these ideas of gendering these parts of yourself? Just go deeper. A lot of people are starting to read a lot of real literature on two-spirited individuals in some of the cultures and some other cultures where and how they look at individuals who are identifying outside of scope of gender norms, if you will. And as a result, that helps them to really find something they resonate with. But there's so much, I always say there's so much to us than just our gender. So I would just say go inwards, try to connect to yourself from different vectors beyond just the external, and also try to connect to other people too. There's such a power in social connection. There's such a power in social support. So that's what I would really, really recommend. And I wish you all the best. I know it's really hard for people who want to, but they feel like they just can't do. And that can be really, really hard. Hey there, recently discovered your channel on YouTube, and watching your videos has been a really good experience for me. I'm so glad to hear. I've been out as trans masculine for nearly 4 years now, but in the past almost year, with the rise of transphobia, I found myself faced with a lot more agonizing and pain from the way I feel. My question is really, can experience ongoing discrimination affect the way I experience dysphoria? Yes, I'm taking a deep breath because absolutely it can and it does affect your sense of dysphoria. Because think about it this way. So dysphoria is a psychological distress that you're feeling as a result of the incongruency you feel with your gender identity. Like I said, you still live in a world that is gendering your body. Not only body, this world is gendering your body functions and everything else around it. So when you already feel dysphoria, you already feel incongruency, and then you step into the environment of the world where there's so much more hate and stigma, and everybody's talking about your identity, and everybody's talking about whether your identity is right or not, or should exist or not, or whether it is psychological issue, or whether it's a medical issue, or whether, and on and on and on and on. And you get in the midst of this vortex, it's going to exasperate issues of dysphoria, and it's going to make you that much more almost, the word I'm looking for, susceptible, but I'm looking for another word. It's going to make you very sensitive, I want to say, to all of that in relationship to dysphoria. A lot of people right now, I feel like their dysphoria has exponentially went up because of what's happening in the world, because of how much emphasis is being put on transgender issues, because of anxieties and fears with gender-affirming care being banned. And that's going to exasperate things, because when the world is also putting a mirror front and frontal to what you're already struggling with, there's no way for you to escape it. There's no way for you to get a little bit of a breathing room, a little bit of respite from it. And that makes it very, very difficult. If the world wasn't putting so much emphasis on transgender affirming care right now, a lot of you would have a more breathing room, a lot of you would have less anxiety, a lot of you would have more time to sit with yourself to figure out what you really need versus feeling so much despair. So yes, absolutely, it can exasperate you, dysphoria that you feel. I would recommend limit news, limit media, social media, limit all of those things, and try to find yourself, carve out a time in a day when you can be quiet with yourself, when you can sit with yourself, when you're away from all these outlets, because absolutely it can, you know, that discrimination can definitely increase that. And I want you to take care of yourself. And I'm so sorry. The world is such a painful place right now. So my heart really goes out to you, and other people comment below, share what you recommend, because I know all of you are going through this very, very difficult time. Question number 5. Hi, I'm still working my way through a video library, but I have a couple of questions. What would you advise for someone that has had gender identity and dysphoria in a repressed state due to prolonged denial? And what would be recommended as first steps for someone that has awakened from denial late in life, but now fully acknowledges it? It's a great questions. A lot of adults, especially older adults I work with, experience this repressed state due to prolonged denial. Especially the older you are, you lived and experienced maturity of your childhood in a time frame when there was no really language, we weren't talking about gender concepts, and so as a result, it was that much more easier to repress and that much more easier not to deal with the things. And things can sit on us. You'd be surprised for a very long time until the lid goes up and they all come to the surface. I recommend, if if you just became aware of it, and by the way, when you just become aware of it, it can be really, and is incredibly overwhelming. I call it gender crisis, when suddenly the lid went off and you're looking at yourself and you're looking at your world, and suddenly everything has shifted, your life has shifted. And for a lot of it, it's very hard because you have already have, I call ecosystems, right? You have families, you have work, you have other things around you, and you're terrified because then shifts have to be made sometimes. And that's really, really scary. And it's terrifying to figure out things about yourself that have been repressed for a long, long time and that you haven't been in touch with. It can be really, really scary. At the same time, it can also feel very liberating, and it can also feel very freeing in the midst of all of that fear. So what I recommend as the first steps is take a deep breath. You just became aware of it, even though maybe you spent years and years and years in denial. It also doesn't mean that you have to drop everything and run and rush into things just because you're looking at your lifespan and you're saying, oh my God, I'm in my, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and I better get over and deal with it before my life is over. Give yourself a breathing room, giving yourself several months, even a year of untangle all of this and make sense of everything, and to process the aspects of denial dating back to maybe even your childhood. A year is not a long time. It may sound like it's a long time, but it is not a long time. And it'll just make the rest of the process, whatever it is you decide to engage in, so much better for you and so much more smoother for you, because you're going to know yourself much more and your relationship with yourself will be established. So my first advice is give yourself time. Take a deep breath. You acknowledge this happening. Now, what does it all mean to you? What does it all mean to you? What is your gender bubbling to the surface telling you right now? For some adults, it's telling them that they no longer can live in their gender assigned at birth. They no longer can do it. For some adults, it suddenly explains the way they've been relating, the way their relationship has been. It suddenly lends itself to explaining why their life has been the way it is. For some adults, it's this realization that, oh, I have this gender inner conflict that I never realized I have, but I'm also not ready, nor do I want to do anything about it. So sit with what is it telling you? What do you need at all to do anything about it, instead of just, rushing or listening to what people telling you how to do. Listen to yourself. What does yourself need? Sometimes our inner selves need more time. Sometimes our inner selves need to connect to that part of our gender that has been blocked away for so long. Sometimes our inner self needs to establish contact. Your conscious mind need to now establish a dialogue with that part of your identity, and you need to hear what that part of your identity is telling you. What is it trying to say? For some people, it's saying, I need to breathe, I'm suffocating, let me the heck out of here. For some people, it says, I'm freaking out, here I am, I'm part of you and you're part of me and I'm freaking out. It can say so many things. So take your time, allow yourself time, take a deep breath, and give yourself that much. If you spend a long time in denial, especially, I feel like you owe to yourself a little bit of time to unravel the denial a little bit more. And again, I'm not, by the way, I want to be clear, I'm not saying that unravel as in the sense of, oh, maybe you're not trans. No, just understand more that part of yourself that has been locked away and dormant for so long. Just establish a line of connection, a dialogue, if you will. So that would be my recommendation. And you're not alone. So many people experience this, and it can be really a lot of clients that I see are in that position. They come to me and they're like, I just realized this, and what the heck do I do about it? And, we spend a few sessions diving really deep in and discovering what it means for them. And sometimes it turns out that they feel that they need to make those steps toward gender transition. And sometimes they say, no, I'm not ready yet, and I need some more time. All valid. And sometimes people say, I don't want to do anything about it. All valid. So sit with it. Final question for today. I'm stuck. Well, hold on. Yeah, I was going to show there's no more questions. I don't want to miss out. I'm stuck at a conservative Christian college for another year. It's been difficult balancing being me versus wearing the mask. Yeah, I bet. To make it through the day, I've been dissociating and going on autopilot. I'm not gonna lie, not the best thing you can do for yourself. Really not good. At the end of the day, it feels like this gender gremlin is trying to tear it way out. Gender gremlin. You mean your authentic self equals gender gremlin? Do you have any advice on how to navigate college and traditions so I don't have the mental distress on top of dysphoria? Ooh, tough questions for today. I can hear a lot of you are struggling with so much. And this is another tough one. You know, my first advice, try not to dissociate and be on autopilot. Dissociation is such not a good coping mechanism. Once you start dissociating, you then form a habit of dissociating. And then when you, even people who now feel more in alignment with who they are, continue to struggle with dissociation even after transition. It's such a difficult thing to kind of beat out of yourself, and to be present. It's really important to be present, to be grounded in the world and not to dissociate. It's just, yeah, so my first advice is either any other coping that you can do other than dissociating and being on autopilot, because it's really not going to serve you in the long run. Now, I was going to say college is often one of the best environments for people to express their gender identity, because it tends to be such a melting pot of diversities and cultures and genders and expressions and so on and so forth. But you're in a Christian college, so it seems like that might not be the best place for that avenue. Can you see a therapist? Even if you see somebody once a month to unpack it all, to talk about it, can you form a support group of like-minded people online? Can you show up as yourself in other parts of your life, even if it's online, even if it's just a picture of you, true authentic self on Instagram, even if it is something else? How can you allow your authentic self shine in other areas of your life to offset the stress you feel when you're on college campus, the stress you feel when you have to, like you said, wear a mask, because wearing a mask can be very painful. That's what I would really, really recommend. Do you have to go to this Christian college? Can you transfer to another college? Is that an option for you? If that's not an option for you, again, how can you not so much? Also, here's another thing though. How can you not see it as I'm wearing a mask and wake up in the morning with this negative visceral dialogue? I'm just about to step out the door and I'm about to put on a mask and I hate it and I'm going to pretend who I am and I hate it that nobody can see me or know who I am, so I'm going to dissociate and be on autopilot. How can you wake up and have a different conversation with yourself that, okay, I'm going to college, it's not the safest environment to be myself, so this part of my gender assigned at birth, that while I don't feel congruent with that part of me, is that is still also a part of me, and I'm going to let that part to be in the forefront center, because that's also the part that's right now keeping me safe, at least in the context of the college. So I'm going to allow that to keep me safe as a container throughout the day, but I'm going to be present and grounded within myself. How can you also not divorce yourself so much from your gender assigned at birth? I see a lot of people do that, where they just really want to annihilate their old selves. And, again, it's not the best way to go. So how can you do that? That I think wouldn't be really, really helpful to you. And again, support system is going to be huge for you. But more than anything is having the dialogue where you're not hating that part of yourself so much, where you're not feeling like you're wearing a mask, where you're feeling like, yeah, I'm showing up. And this is just part of me showing up, that I'm working on toward my authenticity, but this is also part of it until I step into my full authentic self. Hopefully this helps. I really hope others will comment below and share their input and some suggestions for you. And I know that it can be difficult, but a lot of times it also matters that what kind of conversations we have with ourselves. What are the dialogues we carry within ourselves? And some of us have very brutal, very negative conversations with ourselves that are just very punitive and just really self-deprecating and loathsome. And it's not necessary. If we just rearrange how we talk to ourselves, it makes it a little bit more easier to handle the external world. So that's what I'd recommend. Great questions for today. I can hear so much pain in everybody's questions today, and my heart really goes to all of you. Comment below, let me know your thoughts, share your input with the questions. If you have questions of your own, leave them below or email them to info@drzphd.com. And I wish you all the best. I'll see you all next time. Bye.